I'm standing in front of the headquarters of a company that manages $10.6 trillion. That's more
Damn.
than half the United States GDP.
10.6 trillion.
Last time, I covered the shady consulting group McKinsey, and you guys asked for one thing.
How long is that? Like, if you need to make
So here we are.
10.6 trillion
Blackrock
on
is the
minimum
subject
wage,
of a
how
lot
long
of
would it take
speculation
you?
online.
There is a robot that controls more wealth than
100,000
any country
years?
on Earth.
Really, the commander-in-chief is Larry Fink.
They have stock in 95% of Fortune 500 companies, and they've been hired by governments across the world to help manage financial crises and even just conduct normal operations. That means that pretty much any time you interact with the economy, working, buying stuff, driving a car, going to the bank, anything, you're interacting with Blackrock.
I mean, that's the good thing with buying stocks, you know?
Really their money.
Like,
don't worry.
Like when you buy stocks, every time someone's, like for example, Apple, every time someone buys an Apple phone, if I own Apple stocks, you know, I'm making money basically. But it's scary to think that 95%, like 95% of the expenses you do, the money you spend, goes into their bank accounts. That is scary.
Back to that. And they claim they're just passive investors, which seems harmless, right? While I love a good conspiracy, and I know there was a cornucopia on the Fruit of the Loom logo, how much of a conspiracy is this really? I wanted to get to the truth behind Blackrock and the other nearly identical asset managers, State Street and Vanguard, known as the Big Three. Are they actively controlling the world and shaping it in their favor?
See, the scary thing is with Vanguard, right? So they are the guys who came up with the ETF. So that's basically owning, like, when you buy one stock, you buy 500 stocks. They put 500 stocks in one basket and they come up with this thing called an ETF, right? So when you invest, you just buy their ETF and you own a small portion of these 500 stocks, right? But the scary thing is, because there's so much money pouring into these ETFs, the companies behind these ETFs own the voting rights for whatever stocks you buy, right? So they're basically crowdsourcing everybody's money and using that to shape the decisions of the companies, which is quite scary when you think about it, because it's not even their money to begin with, right?
Or are they passive investors just riding the wave of American economic expansion? Stay with me. We'll get to the spooky stuff soon, but first let's talk through some finance basics that give Blackrock their power. What an asset manager actually does, the main product they provide, index funds, their favorite loophole, passivity, and their position in our economy, the not at all terrifying sounding universal ownership. Blackrock is an asset manager, and the service they offer is taking a customer's money and making more money out of it. Their existence relies upon an important invention of the 70s.
This one, I bet it's only $119.
More exciting, the index fund.
Yeah,
it was pioneered by the first CEO of Vanguard,
ETFs,
and it
index
offers
funds,
investors a way
same
to
thing.
invest in many stocks at
Vanguard,
once.
Jack
So
Bogle.
instead of betting a lot on a few individual companies, you bet a little bit on every company in the whole index. Basically just the whole market
And then they
itself.
own your voting
The
rights.
index at least steers a steady course.
It's like instead of betting on a single horse, you're betting on all the horses at once. And index funds are a form of mutual fund, the more general way people pool their money together to make big investments. But someone needs to be the one to pool all that money together and manage it, and that's an asset manager, i.e. Blackrock. Index funds and ETFs are their main products, and they're pretty similar. They're popular because they're lower risk, have more consistent returns, and are cheaper for asset
7%
managers
a year.
because they don't have to
7
pay
to
a guy to
9%.
place bets all day, which studies show they are not very good at.
I mean, it's like what do you call it? Like catch-22? Like you're screwed either way. I mean, if you don't know how to invest, you give your money to these investment companies, they're going to screw you over. Management fees, the trading fees, like for every trade they execute, they're going to take a small portion of that. And then if they make money, they're going to take a portion of that. If they lose money, it's none of their business. You're the one losing money, right? And all right, so if you do that, you're screwed. But if you don't know how to do it, you're screwed. So the only way that you can invest if you're not portfolio or stock savvy is to buy like an ETF, to buy an index fund, right? 7 to 9% a year. But then you're screwed in a totally different way. Let's keep on.
The folly of short-term speculation. It's absolutely a loser's game.
Yeah,
So if
that's
the
true.
market is up 7% today, so is your index fund. Instead of constantly buying and selling shares, which is what active investors do, BlackRock and these big asset managers buy a little bit of every company and just hold on to those shares basically indefinitely.
Yep.
This is called passive investing, a title that affords them a lot of legal leeway they otherwise wouldn't get. They
Yep.
own so much that it would be impossible for them to sell out of any one stock in one fell swoop.
When you think about passive, we can't sell a company as long as they're in the index.
Most of the money asset managers manage comes from institutional investors. Those are big pension funds, insurance companies, nonprofits, and university endowments. But while all
Yep.
the money they manage is in the hands of these big institutions,
Trillions
most of it
trillions
actually
of dollars.
comes from regular people.
Trillions.
Public and private pension plans, 401k owners, college tuition, and anyone with insurance.
Yep.
This is your money, but it doesn't always come.
What people don't know about insurance, right, is that to mitigate the risks, like they basically operate like a bank, right? So you pay their insurance, you pay the insurance cost. They take the money and they invest it, and most of the times they need to invest in something that's steady, right? So they invest in ETFs, which just makes these companies even bigger.
To you. Nor do you get a say in the companies it gets invested in. While they want good returns on those investments, contrary to how we think about Wolf of Wall Street type investors, that's not actually their main goal. They make their profits from the fees they charge their
Yep.
clients, not from the returns on the money they invest. I spoke with Benjamin Braun, a professor of political economy at the London School.
It's basically like a pyramid scheme, right? So the more money that goes into these ETFs, the higher the price goes, right? The higher the stock price. So and they don't really have to care about if it, I mean, to maximize your profits, it's just going to go up because there's so much money pumping into it.
Economics. He's written a bunch of studies on asset managers' role in our economy and society.
The fees you earn if you're BlackRock increase when the market value of the assets you manage increases. You maximize your assets under management by winning over new clients and by getting the clients that you already have to give you more money.
When you have $10 trillion, you have to put them somewhere, and eventually that somewhere becomes everywhere.
Universal ownership refers to holding shares in the entire universe of firms listed
Damn.
on the stock market. The big three asset managers, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, hold a sizable but still relatively small stake in all listed corporations.
All of them?
BlackRock is a 3 to 10% shareholder in all of these companies. This may not sound like a lot, but it's enough that selling all of it at once would likely crash that
Definitely,
entire
but they can't
stock,
sell it.
kind of locking them into the whole not selling passive thing.
5% in any individual company is actually very significant because if and
Trillions of
when
dollars, right? So
shareholders
that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 digit. That's trillions, right? Should be
First,
trillions.
5% makes you, in all likelihood, the single largest shareholder in that company. That's why,
Really?
for example, in a lot of academic studies, 5% is taken as a threshold for control.
Really?
There's almost no difference between Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, and even a bunch of other asset managers in terms of their business model. So then you can start and wonder, okay, so if the big three together hold 25% of the shares in any individual company, then you're definitely above the threshold.
Let's zoom in on
Wait,
Amazon.
so if they all gang
the
up
big
together,
three own 16% of all outstanding Amazon shares. Jeff
right, that's
Bezos
16%.
only owns 9%.
Oh my god,
In
really?
theory, universal owners should have an interest
So
in maximizing
so all these conspiracy
profits
theories
in the
saying that they control America. It's true. I mean, they freaking own like all the big companies, eh?
long term across the entire economy. And that is not how they operate in practice.
The amount of stock you have determines the number of votes you get. BlackRock is
Votes.
almost always in the top 3, maybe 5 if they're feeling broke. So that is a lot of votes.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, it's not BlackRock's money that's invested.
Yeah, it's your money.
It's your dad's pension fund and
It's your
your
pension
insurer's
fund,
massive pile of
insurer's
savings.
massive pile of savings.
It sounds crazy, but when you put your money in a pension fund, you sign away your voting rights to the pension
Yeah,
fund
that's true.
manager. And then when the pension fund manager puts all their pension
just a
funds
huge
under an
pyramid scheme,
asset
right?
manager's control, they sign away all
Keeps
those
going up.
votes to the asset manager. Kind of pyramid scheme vibes.
Told you guys.
And how do they actually use those votes? A 2017 study found that
This is the
asset
scary
managers
part.
almost always voted with what the company executives recommended. And why are they always voting with company management?
Are they
Back
better?
in the 80s, company managers used to spend company money on company things, like corporate jets, fancy offices, or occasionally paying their employees. And this made the investors sad because they wanted those profits. So they started offering company managers, in addition to bonuses and benefits, stock options.
Huh.
Executives' total pay was now
Yeah,
forever
that's
tied
smart.
to
I
how
mean, that
much
was a
the
smart
company
move, right?
made.
They can push managers, corporate managers, to act more in the interest of shareholders, meaning in the interest of corporate profits, and do more to maximize corporate.
I mean, if you do that, then that basically just incentivizes them to do what's best for themselves and what's best for you guys. Because if you guys own the stocks, and to do what's best for themselves, they need to make sure the stock price goes up, right? So that they can get good Christmas presents at the end of the year, right? So yeah, that's a smart move.
This funnels money back to investors who now include management and away from any hope of making companies work better or including employees in the profits that their labor created. Back in the day, like my grandparents'
employees
day,
are always
more
taking
regular
the short
people
end
had
of the
stocks,
stick.
and the idea was that every shareholder could vote on things like board elections, mergers and acquisitions, executive compensation, and once in a while wages. Sort of like democracy for people with disposable income.
Government is the people's business, and every man, woman, and child becomes a shareholder with the first penny of tax paid.
In 1945, 94% of stocks were owned by households. But that's not really how it works anymore.
94%.
Today, households have more like 40% of the stock market, and about half of that belongs to the top 10%.
You know, it's scary. Like this is inequality basically in one chart, right? So it starts with like companies only like holding like a 5% share, like a 6% share out of 100%, right? Households own 94%, and then after the course of less than 100 years, it's flipped. It's totally flipped. Scary times, man. Scary
Today,
times.
the top 1% own 50% of corporate equity and mutual fund shares, while the top 10% own 86%. Did you think this yellow part was everyone else?
Crazy.
Nope. The tiny green part on the bottom is the least wealthy half of Americans.
You often hear this argument that what is good for shareholders is good for everyone because, especially in the US, where retirement assets are overwhelmingly invested in corporate equities.
And then what can you do? Because if you don't do this, you're either going to give it to an asset manager who's going to screw you over, or you're going to go in on GameStop at probably the highest price and lose a bunch of money and do some stupid shit with the money, right? So you can only give the money to BlackRock and these corporations, right?
Simply not true. The bottom 50% virtually
I mean,
no
like
shares at all.
A normal like household, normal person, everyday person, he or she would have no idea about stocks, right? Like your household wife wouldn't have time to study stocks. She'd be busy with the kids, with the house, with going out with friends, whatever. Average household guy wouldn't have time to study stocks. Be too busy working, right? So that puts these stock companies at a really unfair advantage, right?
The vast majority of shares are held by the top 10%, and within that, even shareholdings are quite concentrated within the top 1%.
And while the strategies corporations choose because asset managers vote for them affect everyone, they only benefit half the population even a little bit and frequently hurt the other half, those without any shares at all. Take the example of worker pay. BlackRock and other asset managers play a huge part in wage stagnation.
If you're a corporation, you can increase
cut
profits
the wages, increase the profits.
And you can always, in the short term, increase returns to shareholders by squeezing workers.
So this kind of uber monopolization really hurts working people.
Yeah, every time a new board takes over or like profit-hungry board buys over a business, the first thing they do is cut people off, lay people off. Immediately, it raises their profits.
Consumers and even small businesses. And this is where it gets interesting. There's evidence that this type of universal ownership is in part responsible for why everything is so expensive these days. For example, they have significant stakes in Nike, Adidas, Lululemon, and Under Armour.
Raising the prices
if one
too?
outperforms the other, it's the same from BlackRock's point of view. And sometimes it can even lose investors' money altogether if companies were to start lowering prices to compete.
That's the universal ownership logic in action, but it's also an anti-competitive logic in action. The fact that
This
all
is
five
sinister.
airlines,
I
all
didn't
the
even
major
think about
banks, for example, in the US have
So
the same...
so basically they own all these companies in the same competitive arena, right? So Lululemon, Nike, whatever, right? All these companies who are selling basically almost the same products, just different brands. And usually with competition, you know, the companies think about ways to make their stuff cheaper or better at a lower price, right? But if the big owner at the end are these companies, they're not incentivized to have them lower their prices, right? So the prices are just going to keep on staying higher.
large shareholders creates a danger and a risk that these corporations will not engage in competition in the same way they would if they each had different shareholders. Because in that world, each shareholder would root for their company and would hope to outperform
like
the
soccer,
market by the company
like the
they
NBA.
waged a bet on.
It's sort of like a neo-monopoly where companies don't even have to merge and buy each other anymore because they all send profits to the same guys no matter what. And their large stakes in basically every company affords them friends in high places. From just 2014 to 2015, BlackRock performed over 1,500 private engagements with the companies held in their portfolio.
Yeah, that's the thing. So they don't need to make votes. Like they don't need to make public votes. But if I'm the manager of BlackRock, I call up Apple, say, hey, I own 5% of your company. With my other two friends, I own 15% of your company. I want a meeting with you. I'm concerned about the upcoming products that you're thinking about coming up with. I can have meetings with the top of the top, with Tim Cook, for example, and I could influence his decision. I wouldn't even have to vote on his decision. I could just influence it directly.
Reportedly believes that meetings behind closed doors can go further than votes against management, and they typically give management a year before voting against them. They also have a lot of friends in the government. There's a sort of revolving door between BlackRock, the government, and the international bodies that create monetary policy. Things like the US Treasury, Federal Reserve, the central banks of Canada, some European
can all be swayed by
countries,
money,
Sweden,
for sure.
as well as the International Monetary Fund and the World Economic Forum. Since 2004, BlackRock has hired at least 84 former government officials, regulators, and central bankers worldwide.
The intersection of politics and business has never been more ongoing.
Larry Fink himself is on the board of the WEF and even tried to get himself selected as Hillary Clinton's Treasury Secretary in 2016. And in 2008, they got themselves a pretty sweet deal.
Traders saying this is the craziest day they have ever seen in these markets. Veteran traders saying they've never seen anything like it.
In the aftermath, the government created the Financial Stability Oversight Council to oversee entities like BlackRock that control a lot of money but aren't banks.
If you create a council and the company you're trying to oversee has much more power than you, how are you going to oversee them? You can't. That's not how it works.
The FSOC pointed to BlackRock as an organization that's so big that its failure could cause another collapse, and tried to put additional oversight on them. But BlackRock doubled their political lobbying spending, including running a super targeted ad campaign on the DC Metro, and managed to dodge the oversight that other large financial institutions receive. And let's come back to that loophole they like to call passivity. The people who decide if they're passive enough to continue not to be overseen by the government.
The thing with lobbying is the ROI for companies. I think someone came out with a study or something similar. I think it was like 500 to 1,000%. Every dollar spent, companies make $1,000 back. I mean, I'm not sure if it was 1,000, but it was super high. I remember it was super, super crazy. Like, definitely worth the money. Every bit on lobbying.
Is BlackRock themselves. Basically, BlackRock and other asset managers have to submit annual letters to self-certify that they've been compliant with the terms of passive investment. That's like being allowed to write whatever you want on your taxes and then audit yourself. Except if you also had $10 trillion, which, unless you're watching this and you're literally Larry Fink, hey bestie, I'm going to safely assume you don't. The part that really blows my mind is that while this one company already has their eggs in basically every basket and is making money off seemingly everyone, it goes even deeper than that. The biggest investors in BlackRock are Vanguard and State Street. And the biggest investors in Vanguard are BlackRock and State Street. And the biggest investors in State Street are, you guessed it, BlackRock and Vanguard.
asset managers are the shareholders of asset managers. And this is true for all financial firms, and not only, in fact, for stock market listed firms, but private equity firms buying up private insurers.
So the financial sector effectively owns itself.
Oh my
The
God.
biggest companies that they own them back, creating this loop that sucks money in and never seems to spit it back out. They play all sides of the game because at a certain point, you can't lose when you play against yourself. So going back to our original questions, does BlackRock own everything? No. But do they control everything? Kinda. They profit off of every bit of your life while controlling just the minimum amount they need to make sure they can continue profiting off of every bit of your life.
Man.
And they get paid by teachers' retirement funds to do it. And they get away with this by constantly exchanging money for power and utilizing legal loopholes. It's worth being pedantic here for a second. They don't own everything. They own shares in everything, which gives them an outsized amount of control.
Why own it
So
when
while
you can
they're
just
not necessarily
control it,
the ones
right?
making all the nitty-gritty decisions in every company, it is their influence and this giant structure of universal ownership that continues to make their pie bigger and ours smaller. It's the ultimate endgame of the Investor Management Alliance. Remember the part about how they're responsible for reporting their own passivity to the government? The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the FDIC are working to change that and make it so that asset managers that own large chunks of banks.
Yeah, I mean, that's what every politician says, right? 4 years before they're in office, right? Next 4 years, I'm gonna do blah, 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 whatever. 4 years gone by, nothing done.
Like BlackRock are regulated like banks. The asset managers, of course, are not happy, and they are
Banks
lobbying
aren't
against
regulated
this.
good.
So regulating them much further is going to prove difficult. And this is a solution to one part of a much larger problem. We no longer have the old system of shareholder democracy. We have something more like a shareholder oligarchy where the people with the most power over where our money and stuff goes are incentivized to make that stuff worse.
You know, it's a good thing we haven't come out with a way to live forever yet, right? Because if we did, we'd just be screwed. Like 100 years time, these guys would still be living. We wouldn't be able to build up assets. We wouldn't be able to build up long-lasting things, right? Because we'd probably have to pass down our knowledge through our children, right? Whereas, you know, if someone came up with something that could make you live forever, I think, you know, it'd be the top 1% who would be able to afford it first, right? And they just control everything, right? And just make it so hard for anyone else to live forever.
Expensive and not work for us. But BlackRock didn't create this system. They just used it to their advantage. And I think we deserve a better one, where the people who create the wealth have a say in where it goes. Thanks for watching The Classroom, where controlling
Yeah, what do you guys think? Let's take a look at some comments. As it turns out, if you're a monopoly, antitrust can get you, but if you're not a monopoly, rather 3 oligopolies sharing a trench coat, that's totally legit. Yeah. Yeah, remember when French protesters attacked BlackRock's office and the whole media showed up? No, I don't remember that, because if the media didn't say it, probably didn't happen. Right. Yeah. If you have a 401k, you're part of BlackRock. No, basically you're helping BlackRock on their vision. To them, you're no one, right? Yeah. I like this comment. A rising tide may lift all boats, but about 50% of us are out here trying to fashion out a raft out of old IKEA furniture. I mean, that's the thing, like, right? So, normal person, if they don't come from like generational wealth, if they don't have a lot of money, if their parents didn't leave them lots of money, right? So they need to work at entry-level jobs, slowly work their way up, build asset, and build money, and build savings, and then buy assets, right? But they're never gonna get on the level of wealth as these guys, right? They're never going to be able to control as much as these guys, right? So it's like the everyday Joe is never going to form like a union or anything to dismantle these guys, because these guys already formed the union without your consent, took all your money, and used it to control everything, right? So, oh my god. Yeah, I'm surprised that no one said anything about like Jews owning the whole entire world or something, you know? Because I mean, I'm pretty sure like if you follow the conspiracy theorist, right, the Jews own everything, which is probably true, right? Because before this video, I didn't even, you know, I took what like the Blackrock conspiracy thing with a grain of salt, right? Because you know all the channels that were doing like Blackrock stuff were these weird conspiracy channels, right? Or these like hit piece channels, I call them. But this is actually it's pretty good research, I think. Well, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you have any other thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and come back for a next video really soon, which is probably already out. I'm your host. I'll be here all day with you guys, I think. Yeah, so far I'm not being able to stream yet with my lousy internet. Hopefully I can change that in the future and we can have a chat in the chat room. Well, see you in the next vid. Take care.